This week has been an unqualified success. You've had visibly, obviously, a lot of fun, a lot of edification, a lot of teaching, and you're about to re-enter how things actually are. Now, your temptation will be to think that, well, here, this is the counsel I would give you. Don't doubt in the dark what you knew in the light. When you were here and things came into focus, and you understood them, and you grasped them, and you remembered them, and everything makes sense, and then you go back into the ordinary pace of life, and everything turns murky and starts confusing, and maybe I didn't understand it as well as I thought I did. This is it. Don't doubt in the dark what you knew in the light. Also, as you walk by faith, not by sight, and this is the key to the key is what you do with what you've heard. So everything is about application. It's wonderful that you've learned. It's wonderful that you've enjoyed. It's wonderful that you've had good fellowship. You've made new friends. All of that is good, and we are enthusiastically all about it because this is what we want you to experience. But we want you to experience it because we want you to apply it. We want you to apply it. And in many cases, within the first week, you're going to be challenged to apply it when it doesn't seem to make sense anymore. Right? It doesn't seem to make sense anymore, but it does. And this is how God has made the world. George MacDonald once said, "Obedience is the opener of eyes." Obedience is the opener of eyes. I would add that obedience is the great opener of eyes. What that means is that the understanding and the knowledge that you have come to as you've been listening and taking notes and talking with your friends, that's good, that's genuine. But when you go into a real life situation and you forgive a friend who let you down, or you honor your father and mother in ways that you didn't used to want to honor your father and mother, you go back and you obey, remembering in the dark what you knew in the light. What's going to happen is God gives light. To those who walk in the light, God gives more light. Right? Obedience is the opener of eyes. Now, another couple exhortations that I would like to leave with you. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, it says that whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do everything to the glory of God. What Paul is telling us is that everything we do, however trivial, the meal that you have at a fast food joint, down to the last French fry, ought to be done to the glory of God. What this tells us is that the sovereign God, if a small bird can't fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father, if the hairs of your head are all numbered, then what seems trivial to you doesn't seem trivial to Him. God is exhaustively sovereign. We are taught in the book of Acts that in Him we live and move and have our being. He's tracking all of it. God knows the position and velocity of every atom in the planet Jupiter. He knows it right now. He knows it instantaneously. He knows it immediately. He doesn't know it because He finds it out. God is engaged in everything, everywhere, all the time, which means that you are with Him. And it means that when you feel like He's not with you, that's an illusion, and you need to remember the light while you're walking in what appears to you to be dark. But it's not dark to Him. It's not dark to Him. Corrie ten Boom said one time that God has no problems, only plans. God has no problems, only plans. And your problems are not, I don't want to say that your problems are not His problems, because Peter tells us to cast all your anxieties on Him, cast all your burdens on Him because He cares for you. So in one sense, your problems are His problems, but when they're put into His hand, they aren't problems. They're not problems. God has everything totally, completely, and entirely under control. Now, what this means is that when you get whizzed up at a conference like this and you want to change the world, which is the intention, that's the design, we want you to want to change the world, it's easy for you to think that's only going to happen if I go off and do some great thing. If I come back from this Christian Worldview camp and I carve a cure for cancer out of a bar of soap, or if I run for president or Congress, or if I do this, if I only do some great spectacular thing. What I want you to understand is that in God's economy, there are no little people. In God's economy, faithfulness where you are is what God has called you to. This is the called conference. You are called. And one of the great doctrines that was recovered in the Protestant Reformation was the doctrine of vocation and calling. Over the centuries prior to the Reformation, a pernicious and damaging doctrine had developed that said there were two classes of Christians. There were the clergymen up front doing the religious, trained religious professional stuff, and then there were the people out there, the tithers, the breeders, the people who came and observed and watched and didn't do anything. Well, that was that false doctrine of clergy laity, where the clergy are the ones sold out for Jesus, and the laity are the people who just, give money from time to time and show up and pay a little bit of attention. That wall of partition collapsed, came down in the Reformation, because the Reformers taught that absolutely every Christian is called to absolutely every lawful vocation that they are in. If you are in a lawful vocation, if you're milking the cow, if you're delivering newspapers, if you are studying for school, if you're taking tests, if you are mowing the lawn, that is pleasing to God. So here's an a fortiori argument. How much more argument? If you can eat a French fry to the glory of God, and Paul commands you to, whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do it to the glory of God, then the apparently insignificant thing to you is not insignificant to him, because he says you can do it in a way that glorifies God. How can I make a glass of iced tea for someone in my family to the glory of God? How can I do a trivial task? How can I watch my mom's friend's kid for an hour to the glory of God? How can I do this to the glory of God? Jesus tells us when he points to the widow who put the 2 little pennies in the temple treasury, he said she gave all that she had, and she gave more than all the rich folks who were giving a small percentage of what they had. She gave everything. So if you are faithful in your station, if you are surrendered in principle, if you are walking with God and you're all in, you can expect that he will lead you into the calling that he has established for you. So this is the last thing I want to encourage you with. In Ephesians 2:10, it says, "For we are God's workmanship," that's all of you, "we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared beforehand for us to do." The good works that you're going to be doing a month from now are already laid out. The good works that you're called to are mapped. It's already plotted. It's already scripted. And your task is to walk in it. Now, God doesn't steer parked cars, so you surrender in principle. You want Jesus to be driving. You want to surrender the whole thing, and you want to move. You want to be moving in the direction that God has called you to go. And of course, if you imagine a table where everything on the table is in the will of God for any Christian, anything that's off the table is not the will of God for any Christian. You don't have to pray about whether to marry that non-Christian. You don't have to pray about whether to sell cocaine on the side. You don't have to pray about anything like that, because it's immoral. It's not the will of God for any Christian. But on the table, what's the will of God for you? What's the will of God for you? Because the Lord is not going to throw a brick through the window with a note tied to it telling you what college to go to, I'm going to tell you that. Right? That's a little joke. Because the Lord is not going to throw a brick through the window saying, do this, do that, do the other thing. Anything on the table is a matter of wisdom, not morality. Off the table, immoral. On the table, moral. But you still don't know whether to go to this college or that one, to take this job or that one, to pursue this girl or that one. You just don't know, right? So on the table issues are wisdom issues. They're wisdom issues, not moral issues. And so you have to surrender the whole thing to Jesus. And what I encourage people to do is this: drill 3 holes in the table, right? Metaphorically, don't go home and drill. This is a metaphor. Drill 3 holes in the table and put 3 dowels in the table and walk around on the table. And when those 3 dowels, when those 3 standards line up, go. What are the 3 standards? There should be 3 questions. What are your abilities? What are your opportunities? And what are your desires? God has said it's okay. I can work at this joint or that joint. I can go to this college or that college. It's all lawful. What are my abilities? What can I do? What are my opportunities? What are they going to let me do? What are my desires? What do I want to do? And you say, well, I totally have the ability to play in the NBA, and I really have an intense desire to play in the NBA, but nobody's asking. Strike the second thing. But when all 3 line up, you go. Trust God and go. Trust God and go. And as you're going, remember via your obedience in the trenches, your obedience in the valley, what you learned here. And as you do that, you're going to mature in your Christian life. And when you come back to this event or other events like it, or you learn a new lesson, it's going to be deeper, richer, better, fuller. Thank you.
And now we've got a chance to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask a few, get things started. You be thinking if there's a question you didn't get a chance to ask yet and you'd like to, we'll have a little opportunity here in a bit for you to ask questions of these 3 guys. So you know Nate Wilson, you know Doug Wilson, and you know Steve Dace from earlier. Parents, you'll get a little taste of what the students have gotten this week. So here's the first question I have. So we've been trying to equip you to engage the culture, advance the kingdom. We've been talking about politics and business and media and news and film and writing and all of these areas, encouraging you to consider whether God might be calling you there. So the first question I have for you guys, I actually want you to persuade them not to. Okay, so what I mean is explode some of the romanticized notions that we have, they have, about working. We'll start with Nate and then come over to Steve. The romanticized notions they have about Hollywood and being in film and writing, like what you think they think about what the writing life or the film life is all about. Explode some of those romanticized notions so that they don't go in that way, and we'll come do the same thing about politics and stuff with you.
Okay. So, don't do it. I have a friend who's a filmmaker who has had many, many people your age say, hey, I want to make movies. How do I make movies? How do I do that? What's the career path? And he says, film 21 sunrises in a row, cut it into a little clip, send me the link of 21 sunrises in a row, and then I'll talk to you. When you can get up before dawn and sit there and set up and, lug a bunch of gear around and film the sun rising for, almost a month, then we can have a conversation. It's brutal. It really is brutal. It's a grind. And generally people your age who want to get involved in it are wanting to get involved in it because it will make them famous. They want to get involved because of its shininess. And if you get rid of that shininess and you think, this is gross and ugly and this is a Babylon, but I want to be involved in scaling the walls and conquering it, then that's a better motivation. But that means you have to start working really, really, really hard because everybody else wants to do it too. So, for example, there's 150,000 screenplays registered with the Writers Union in LA every year. These are people who already have credits. They've already made it, quote unquote, made it. And there's 150,000 new screenplays per year registered with the union. And of those, very, very few will get made, just a couple. And because they're always pulling old IP, books, reboots, franchises. So there are going to be very, very few wide releases, and there's many, many people that want to do it. A lot of people want to write novels. They kind of fall back off of movies because they say, well, that would be really, really difficult, and who's going to give me $200 million to make a comic book movie? So I'm going to write novels. That'll be my path to fame. Well, even more people are trying to do that because that is, I think, seen as the route to fame if you're not good looking, musically talented, or a freak athlete. So I'm not going to be a rock star. I'm not going to be Steph Curry or LeBron. And I'm not going to be Zoolander, the male model, because I'm really not attractive. So what's left for me? What's my route to fame and fortune?
Radio.
I'll write a book. I'll write a book.
That was a cheap shot.
Actually, you have to do everything on camera, even in radio nowadays.
That's true. That's true.
That won't work either.
True. So anyway, the thing is, it's highly competitive. It's way more competitive than the NBA. The sheer numbers of people competing for it, it is harder than that. And so when people tell me they want to make it, it's like listening to a 16-year-old kid say they want to make the NBA, and I say, well, how often do you play? Well, I watch. Okay. That really is not a step toward playing in the NBA. The guys who make it often are not watching all the games. They're in the gym, it turns out. And they have a freakish advantage to start with. So genetically they have it. Like, do you have the endurance? Do you have the insight? Are you actually a good human? If you're not a good human, you've got nothing to add. There's nothing worth adding. So they just worry about how do I make it, how do I make it, how do I make it, as opposed to how would it be a good thing for the people around me if I made it? How would it be a good thing for culture if I made it? What do I bring to the table? What do I add? And am I working hard enough? Am I actually just better than everyone else? Do I have more to say? An example I gave to several of you who talked to me personally about this week was C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was incredibly broad, incredibly wise, which meant he had content. And when he sat down to write a kid's story, there was depth, there was value, there was a great deal of content. We can all be grateful those stories entered the world. We can be grateful they entered the world because he was such a fantastic human being that his work product had value. And that is the most important thing. Learning the form of film, learning how to shoot and cut is easy. Learning the actual template for a screenplay is easy. But actually being the kind of person who has something so fruitful like Lewis to add is much, much harder and takes far more work. And on top of that, everybody immediately kisses the ring to get the next job. The number of Christians I've met in Hollywood who made it but are scared to ever stand up, to ever say the thing, because they're going to get fired the instant they do, and that 10 to 20 years of work to try to get into that position is just gone. And so they bite their tongue, they don't say the thing, and they just delay, saying, well, eventually when I'm in a position of power, then I won't produce these movies anymore that I'm producing right now. But they never stop, because they only get more to lose, and they're scared of losing it, so they keep compromising. So it's really not about you. If you want to do it for fame, give up now. If you're working a lot at becoming a better human, you can learn the actual structure. The content is harder than the structure is. So just be a fantastic human being, and even if you don't make it, you'll still benefit the world.
Steve, what do you think about, why should they not go into politics? Like, what are the romanticized notions that people have about politics that they need to be aware of?
Well, I love this question because crushing hopes and dreams is my spiritual gift. So prepare to be dazzled. How many of you like to have friends? Raise your hand. That's why, Joe.
That's right. None of you can go be a politician now.
You can't.
You just disqualified
I
yourself.
mean, and I'm not trying to be flippant. You know, I'm not trying to be as profound in a couple of words as Jesus wept, but that is the reality. If you require approval from other people, you cannot do this. Well, let me rephrase this. You can do it. I'll just be blogging about how you sell us out in no time, shortly after you start. Because what typically happens, you know, I had to learn this the hard way. When I first started working in politics, I thought worldview was like location in real estate, right? Location, location, location. So worldview, worldview, worldview. And I would find people who could articulate the right worldview. And so I'd get excited, I'd promote them, I'd help them get elected. And then they would be as useful as mammary glands on a bowl once they got into office. And I took a long time trying to figure out, why is this the case? And I learned before we get to worldview, we have to discern something. Do you want to be somebody, or do you want to do something? You will have to choose which of those the answer is, because you will not get to do both. It's very similar to what you just heard from Nate. If you are running to be somebody, you will claim for a while, I need to get into this position of leadership. I need to get elected. I need to get elected the next time. The next time never comes. That position of leadership where you will suddenly be insulated from scrutiny and now actually do something that might prompt us to think for 3 seconds you're a Christian will never come. You'll just make the next moral calculation, and the moral calculation after that, and the moral calculation after that, and really, we will learn your theology is kicking cans down the road. That's really your theology. Like, you won't even get into the whole Arminian Calvinistic debate. Well, my theology is I kick cans down the road. That's what I believe in. That's what you'll do. And so then the question, so right away, if you want to be somebody, you're out. I mean, I don't care if you've read Calvin's Institutes in his original handwriting, you're out. You can't do this. If you want to do something, then you have to figure out, what is it that I want to do? And another thing that I think you have to understand is, if you make the right public policy your priority, well, like if you talk to most people that identify as Democrats, and you ask them, why are you a Democrat? They're going to tell you, I'm black, I'm gay, I'm a single mom, I belong to a union, I'm a teacher. They're going to give you an identity. If you ask most people, why are you a Republican? They're going to say, I'm pro-life, I believe in limited government, strong national defense. They're going to give you a value, an ideal. So if your priority, ultimately you want to advance good public policy, but if your priority is good public policy, you'll never really or rarely get to do that, because the system is fixed. The game is rigged. The goal of the system is to set you up with a series of false choices. The number one goal of the political system is to prove no one can rise above it, to compromise everybody. It's the Joker's gambit at the end of The Dark Knight. Have two fairies, put bombs on both, good people on one, bad on the other, pit them against each other, and he'll prove, see, the Joker really is the devil when you watch the movie. He's an agent of chaos. The devil's not moral or immoral. That's either one of them would be a standard, because to be immoral, what would we first have to identify? What's moral? The Joker is amoral. There's no end game. There's a body count. I just want chaos. And the chaos is, I want to prove everybody's bad, and therefore no one is worthy of saving. Jesus wasted his time at the cross. You're all beyond redemption, no matter how much God intervenes. And the political system is one of his primary vehicles to force that Hobbes choice, that lady or the tiger, that, as Bart Simpson once said when he was asked in class to define a catch-22, and he said, well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? That's the system. You thought the last election was bad. The devil is just getting started. You're going to have all kinds of terrible choices, and that's the goal, to corrupt everyone. For us as believers, the challenge is, as they said in the movie War Games when I was a kid, the only way to win the game is not to play. To refuse the premise of all of the enemy's arguments. To use the political system, as Paul did in Acts, as a platform and a vehicle for the standing up for and the communication of the gospel. You are not lobbying legislators. You're putting them on notice. This is the law of God. Hell is hot and forever. Up to you. What do you want? And I think we go into the system game planning and strategizing. I've made good money doing that. I'm pretty good at it. And I'm good enough to tell you none of that will work. It's really an old-fashioned sentiment. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. If you see the political arena as a chance for you to communicate the gospel, I've totally changed my paradigm in the last couple of years. I spent 10 years of my life on policy. Got nowhere, except I fought with a lot of your parents a lot because I thought we were doing this with policy. And frankly, your parents thought, well, I really just wanted to vote for the electable Republican and enjoy watching Fox News at night because we own the libs. So apparently that's all we were into. So policy doesn't do anything. So what I learned was, hey, why don't I use my political access as a vehicle to the gospel? And what's interesting is now my inbox is full every day. Mormons, Jews, unbelievers, because they're watching me use the political system to hold every fake side, because most of what you see in politics is pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is real. I mean, that really hurts when a 300-pound man jumps off a top rope and his thigh lands on your face. That hurts. It's real, but it's scripted. It's not fake. It's scripted. The outcome is predetermined. I've had several opportunities to appear on cable news in the last couple of years where they've called me up, they've screened me, meaning we got to find out if you're going to say what we want. That's what it means. And when my take doesn't conform to their Trump is wrong even when he's right, and Trump is right even when he's wrong, that's what they want to put on TV every night. When it doesn't conform to that, they then tell me, well, we're really looking for sides more than opinions. It's scripted, all right? Tonight, we're in Boise tonight. So the Iron Sheik's the bad guy, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan's the real American. Tomorrow we'll be over in Spokane. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, you're the bad guy, and the Iron Sheik, is going to tell us how the Ayatollah is great. The whole thing is scripted. Most of this is fake. That makes it very difficult for Christians who are to be people of truth to thrive. We have a lot of numbers. We win nothing. And I think, and I've just come to the conclusion after years of where I live giving me uncanny access to this, where names you would know, men who run for president, are on my phone, and I can get them on the phone right now if I wanted to. Well, maybe not with the time change, but you know what I mean, okay? I've learned that really, you know what? The most powerful process is the gospel. And when I have unbelievers with multiple baby mamas and everything else emailing me and saying, listening to your show has caused me to reconsider whether God loves me or not, to reconsider whether God has a plan for my life or not. See, change lives, and the laws and the policies will follow. One of the greatest political maxims of this age was the late Andrew Breitbart. Politics flows downstream from culture. When you want to dam a river, you don't go to the bottom of the hill where it's had gravity and momentum on its side. You dam it at the source. And that's really where the battle is at. If we make, since we're quoting C.S. Lewis, I want to join. I'll play, okay? Aim for heaven and you'll get earth thrown in. Aim for earth and you will get neither. If you go into the political system thinking, I want to do good public policy, the system will swallow you whole by saying to guys like Rick Santorum, support Arlen Specter so you can get health savings accounts in a terrible welfare state bill called Medicare Part D. And you'll do it because it's the best deal you can get, and then you'll spend the next 10 years of your career lobbying other believers why this terrible deal you made was really the hostess with the mostest. The system will set you up to lose that way. Go in there saying, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and I'm going to use this to proclaim the glory of God. And I think that's a tactic we haven't yet tried. And I love pragmatism, not the utilitarian pagan type, but like real pragmatism. And so I've made a decision the last couple of years. There's one undefeated being in the history of the universe. Let's try to emulate him and get on his side as much as possible. Not necessarily worry about kowtowing to a bunch of political parties who would sell us out faster than Esau could say pot of stew. Let's actually go into the arena and serve Christ, and let's see what a God who raises the dead to life can do.
That's good. Maybe one or two more questions, and then I'm going to throw it open to them. How this is for all of you, whoever can go for here, this one. How do we surprise non-Christians? So they have all kinds of expectations. So you're going in, whether it's in politics, whether it's in Hollywood, whatever business, whatever arena we're going into, they have all kinds of boxes of what evangelicals, what Christians are like. So as you guys have done this over the years, what are some ways that we can surprise them? Like, what are the things that we can do that can throw them off their, and kind of blow up those little boxes they have? Maybe just experience or any ideas on how to surprise the non-Christians so that they can't just throw us in the expected box.
Just a quick story. Years and years ago, I used to write a weekly political column for the newspaper here, and at the time, Nancy was selling fabric out of the home, and a woman came to buy some fabric, and they were chatting, and then over time, it slowly began to dawn on this lady, and she said, "You're not married to Doug Wilson, are you?" And Nancy said, "Well, yes, I am." And she said, "But you seem so nice." So one of the things to throw people off is, and I would echo what's been said here, is be uncompromising. I would say I call it a Tom Petty Presbyterianism. Don't back down. Just stand your ground, hit above the belt, but fight like a Christian, but fight. And then, to quote Tyrion from the last battle, "Peace, Eustace, do not scold like a kitchen girl. No warrior scolds. Either courteous words or hard knocks are his only language." So knock them down and speak pleasantly. And when they come to meet you and they say, but you're pleasant. You don't have three heads and drool. Because they believe their own caricature, right, that you're a monster because of the positions you hold, and you don't try to appease them by abandoning the position, right? You don't do that, but you walk in the joy of the Lord, exhibit love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, be a normal, pleasant human being with them in your interactions with them, and I think that will throw them off more than anything.
You guys have any surprise?
Do not ever retreat from your people.
Yes.
I mean, just don't. And you can file that underneath. It's another kind of failure to compromise. You just don't compromise. You don't back down from your people. I had an opportunity very, very early where my editor called me desperate and said, "Hey, an awards committee is meeting about your book." And I just got a phone call from a member of this committee who said, "Hey, we want to support this novel for this award, but there's a rumor that he's an evangelical. And I need you to tell me he's not an evangelical so that I can go back in there and we can give this book the award." And I was really grateful that it was that obvious. It was not tricky. There was no, I mean, it really was pretty cut and dried. So he called me desperate saying, "Hey, can I tell them you're not an evangelical?" And I said, "Well, you can tell them they don't know what an evangelical is, but no." And he said, "They're thinking about this, like these big, like, health and wealth megachurch. They're thinking all these things that you're not." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm closer to them than to this awards committee. Even the silly Christians are my people. Like, even the ones with whom I disagree completely are my people." When I got an opportunity to work with Kirk Cameron, I got a phone call from a guy who's now a friend, who said, "Hey, could you write me a baseball movie for Kirk Cameron? But I totally get if you don't do it, because I know it'd be really bad for your brand to be associated with Kirk." Because I was all the way in on the secular, in the secular world. I wasn't living in the CBA. I didn't live in Christian bookstores. They won't carry me, by the way. Like, I can't get placed in Christian bookstores. I lived in the secular world, and so he knew that if I worked with Kirk, my publishers really would probably not like Kirk Cameron. And the instant he said, "I know it'd be bad for your brand," I knew I had to do it. Because he said, "It'd be bad for your brand." And the first thought I had was, yeah, it would. It would actually. It would create awkward conversations. And I'll have to sit in offices in New York City and say, "Yeah, Kirk's my people." He's a good dude. He's a friend of mine.
You like awkward conversations.
I do like awkward conversations, so
That's a qualification.
especially in New York City.
yes. As somebody who's been cursed out in an elevator in the Random House building for having 5 children, yes, I love it. Now, admittedly, right before that, I've been scolding them all for having anything to do with 50 Shades of Grey, but, they came after me for my children. Yeah. But it's, anyway, I have people. I have church people. I've got crazy church people with whom I disagree. I've got, there's all sorts of charismatics. There's stodgy Dutch Calvinists. There's this whole spectrum. Yeah, they're the hardest to get away. But so I've got this whole spectrum, and they're my people. Now, when I go hang out in Hollywood and I have a meeting, and I'm being nice to somebody, and they already know that we're alien species because I have 5 children, and they're very confused, and they're 47 and thinking about settling down with their millions of dollars or whatever it is. We're already totally from different species, and they want me to back away from middle America, crazy evangelicals, even the silly parts, even the parts that I disagree with, and I won't. I won't do it in New York. I won't do it in LA. It's like I will stand with my crazy family at the family reunion rather than with people who hate what I stand for and hate my God. They hate my father, this one. I'm used to that. But all of them, some of them do, some of them don't. But if they hate my father in heaven, it's like, why on earth would I compromise or back away from any of my family for them? You can't.
I'd offer a couple of pointers on this, and I might even come across as nice, and I want to apologize in advance for that. But one, I had to learn early in my radio career that if I was going to be unyielding in what I stood for on the air, I had to compensate for that elsewhere with my coworkers. Because, as I said this morning, human beings aren't algorithms. They're not formulas. And when you take these otherworldly positions, and that's really what we are. We're another kingdom. Our kingdom is not of this world. And so when we take these otherworldly positions and we take them forthrightly and sincerely, it is a natural reaction to think that's not a real person. They're so much different than me. And so I don't think in my radio career there was a mom, married or single, who had a baby shower at work that I didn't donate to. I worked all the extra hours I possibly could. All my coworkers would probably tell you that they wished my show was more marketable, but I was a model teammate and employee to work with. I was low maintenance for my management unless they offered up something that I thought conflicted with my faith. Beyond that, I went the extra mile to treat people well, to compensate for the fact that I wasn't going to give in this other arena. And I had to be flexible in others in order for them to see that this isn't a game. I really believe this stuff, and I'm going to love on you and be kind to you for the same reason I'm going to take these positions you think sound like another language. Because I love you. I'm standing for these things because I love you, and I'm doing the things that you like because I love you. So I would urge you to do that. Figure out what your boundaries are, your convictions you cannot cross. And then aside from those boundaries, serve people and love on people as much as you possibly can up until that point. Another piece of advice I would give you is to be real. In your generation, for people that do what the three of us do for a living, things are different than past eras. The way that you won an argument in previous generations, well, Doug's older, so this might have still been true in his generation. See what I did there? Yeah. But in Doug's really old generation and the one before him, everybody agreed there was absolute transcendent truth out there. And so the argument was who's got the best argument and evidence for their absolute transcendent truth. You would make your presuppositional argument. And then you would add the emotional, personal appeal, the testimony. In your generation, the pyramid is inverted. If I don't connect with you emotionally from the outset, I don't care what you come with after that. Now, we as Christians cannot succumb to a pagan paradigm, but we have to recognize it, and how do we turn that to our advantage at the exact same time? One of the things I talk about, and people sometimes tell me it's too much, I'm beyond open about my past. I was born to a 15-year-old mom who almost aborted me. We literally grew up together. I had a very abusive stepdad, very physically abusive to me, my mom. There were times when I was a teenager, I literally had to physically defend my mom from him. I talk about past sexual promiscuity in my life prior to being a Christian. And I talk about these things openly in the context of my show, particularly where sexuality and family dysfunction is concerned, because that's the vortex of all the public policy debates we have in America today, are really those two things right there. Family dysfunction and sexual immorality are the vortex, the sexual revolution, and the deconstruction of the family. That's the epicenter. You are not going to be able to address public policy at all without talking about those issues. But if I just go into this to a wide audience, because I'm in broadcasting, what's the first word of that? Broad. So here, right away, there's a conundrum, right? I've got to be on this narrow road, but my job is broadcasting. And so the way I've discovered over the last few years is the most effective is for me to lead with my brokenness, for me to lead with my weaknesses, for me to lead with the areas in which I have struggled or others have struggled and their brokenness has been inflicted on me, to make that emotional connection so that the audience can again see when I come back with these unyielding positions that I'm not going to bend on. It's because I was born into and lived most of my life until recently by the standard and code of this world. And I am a living testimony to how destructive it is. And I'm using that to my advantage to make that relational connection. So be real with unbelievers. If you struggle in an area that they struggle in, share it. Don't be ashamed of it. Be open. Let the light in. I love what Doug said earlier about believing in the dark what you witnessed in the light. Let the light in to the dark, into their dark. Show them how the light got into your dark. There is a light shining in the darkness, and the darkness has not comprehended it. Help them to comprehend by letting them see the light through you.
It's interesting. One biblical story for you to go on some of these things right here, for you to go reflect on, okay? In the book of Acts, there's a scene where Paul comes to Jerusalem after he's been doing the Gentile stuff, and he shows up there, and a mob forms because they think, this is the guy who brought the Gentiles into the temple, and you can't do that. And so the mob comes and surrounds him, and the Romans have to come and rescue him, and they haul him off, and then they're like, what in the heck was that? What happened? Aren't you this, you're a revolutionary? Aren't you that guy? He says, no, I'm just a Jew from Tarsus. Do you have a microphone? There's a mob outside trying to kill him, and he says, can I have the mic? And the guy's so shocked by this is a surprise, right? He's shocked that he says, sure, here you go. And so Paul goes out and he sees a congregation. There's a mob. He sees a congregation. And then he starts speaking in Hebrew, which is the last thing these people expect. They think he's a compromiser, he's a Greek speaker, but he starts speaking in Hebrew, and they go silent. And then he starts doing what Steve just said, is he starts building connection. He said, I know what it was like to be you. I was a Jew. I was the Jew of Jews. I persecuted the church. I know exactly what it was like to be you. And he leads with that, and they're silent, and they're listening to them. And then he gets to the end, and he's got them. Like, he's showing them, you too can be a Christian like me. Jesus can be the answer to you. I was like you, now you can become like me. And gets to the end, and he could have just ended it with his testimony, and gets to the end, and he says, and then God sent me far away and to take the gospel to the Gentiles. And then at that moment, everybody goes, away with such a man from the earth, and they rise up to kill him again, okay? And so he did just this. He surprises them, and then he builds that connection, and then he tells the truth. You guys get to ask questions now.
So we've been talking a lot this week about kind of the culture that we live in and the problems in America right now. So my question is, we're living in Rome, and we're supposed to respect our authorities, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. But is there ever a time, and when is that time, if there is one, when we should do what our forefathers did, or do we wait for Constantine?
The full quotation, that's a great question. The full quotation is where Jesus says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Well, he was using a little audio-visual aid. He asked them for a coin, bring me a coin, and he said, whose image is on this? And they said, Caesar's. And then he says, render to Caesar. So how do I know that it's lawful for me to give this coin to Caesar? Well, Caesar managed to get his picture on it. If Caesar's got his image on the coin, it's lawful to render it to Caesar. But Jesus doesn't just stop there. He says, and to God the things that are God's. So how do I know what belongs to God? Well, what has God's image on it? Right? Who's that? That's you. Right? You may give money to Washington because there's the picture of Washington. You may not give yourself to Washington because Washington doesn't have its image on you. God has his image on you. You've got to render to God the things that are God's. Now, if you do that diligently, if you're a model citizen in every respect that you can be, and you're a model Christian in every respect, in every way that God's grace enables you to be, the collision between those two things will take care of itself. There will be a collision. It's an inevitable collision, and it's the collision that our founding fathers experienced, that there was that fundamental collision. But if you are sort of a libertarian anarchist hothead that doesn't like being bossed around by government, that's not a true collision. That's not a real antithesis. So be a dutiful citizen and a model Christian, and you're going to find that Caesar can't tolerate that, as we're discovering.
I don't want to be too forward, but I think you should consider, Doug, getting into ministry. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think this question, short of the gospel message itself, is the most important hermeneutical preaching that the church needs to deliver its people in this era. Because from my generation, Gen X, to you guys, to millennials and Gen Z, we are combined, this three-generational cycle. We are going to be the first generations in American history who will live entirely at a time when some form of presuppositional Christian ethics was not the dominant ethical, moral view of the culture. We're going to live for the first time as a generational cycle in a culture that is either ignorant and or hostile to what we represent. And so previous institutions that our faith inspired and maintained for generations are going to be turned against us, and it's happening already. And just as I said to you earlier, the goal of the political system is to show you must assimilate, you must conform, resistance is futile, any attempt to do something different than what we command won't be tolerated and can't be successful. Because of what Doug just said, that's going to happen. It's going to come to you. It's going to come to you. You know, when you look at Romans 13, if I have seen one Bible verse within Orthodox Christianity bastardized more, it is this one. It is used to either say we must be totally compliant to government, or I even had Tom Minery who used to be on Focus on the Family, tell me once that Romans 13 meant we had to vote no matter what, no matter how bad the candidates were, because we had to honor Caesar, and Caesar compels us to vote. I thought that might have been the single dumbest hermeneutic I've ever heard from somebody not on Twitter, okay? So, you know, if you finish Romans 13, Paul says to give honor to those whom honor is due. Some honors are due. Some honors are not, like what Doug just said. Caesar is owed your obedience, your civic obedience. He is not owed your faithful allegiance. Those are two totally different things. And how do we know that's what Paul meant? What happened to Paul at the end of his life? He was beheaded. Peter echoes Paul's thoughts in one of his epistles. What happened at the end of his life? He was crucified upside down.
He was given a Good Citizen Award?
No, he wasn't. They didn't make him mayor. Okay? So these two guys who told you to honor the king their lives ended at the hand of the king. Why? Because they did honor the king. But the king, Caesar wasn't sufficient. That wasn't enough. It wasn't enough just to be a good citizen. I kind of want you to bow to me too. I kind of want you to say, Polycarp, that I kind of want you to say, Kaiser Curious. I kind of need that too. Your goodwill and not being a criminal and paying your taxes isn't good enough. I kind of want to be God. And you're going to have to learn, all of us in this 3-generational cycle are going to have to learn, when are we going to have to be like that 29-year-old Baptist seamstress in Alabama who sparked the next level of the civil rights movement. When she got on a bus one day, she looked at the iniquity of the situation, and she didn't sue, she didn't petition, she didn't blog. She just said one word: no. No, I will not go to the back of the bus. No. And that changed the face of the civil rights movement. We're going to have to learn, when do we tell this world and Caesar no? We're going to have to do that at some point.
All right. Two more questions. Okay. All right. I'm going to give the GIMP a chance.
Okay, so my question is more towards the son of Mr. Doug Wilson, ND. So it seems like a huge issue and uproar in Hollywood today is like the Harvey Weinstein thing, with all of these sexual assaults accusations coming through. And I was just wondering, like, I'm really confused with what is happening in there, and especially like recently now. Like, I hadn't heard about it previously, especially now. And on the side, they're making like these terrible movies. Like, what is going on there, and how a filmmaker like you can go into that and like change that, or what can we do? Like, I'm confused.
So if you think about the movie business, you should realize, just try to get some perspective, just how acclimated we are to how awful it is. We've all gotten used to it. So imagine any other industry, where an employee had to sign a contract that they would take all their clothes off if their boss told them to. Like, what? Hewlett-Packard has added nudity clauses. If your middle management or senior management calls you in and says, okay, let's do it, take the clothes off, and I've got a camera, I'm going to film it, and you're legally obligated, and it will be enforced in the courts. Legal obligation. This is the only industry that has gotten there, and we casually, as movie consumers, say things like, oh, it's not that bad a scene, or you can just skip that part, it's a good movie. And you have to realize that some girl trying to make it, trying to get famous, ended up signing a contract that she may not have wanted to be in that scene at that moment, but it doesn't matter. She's on the hook. The movie industry has been filthy from the beginning. It's got more than a century now of really being foul. It's been all about, sex for fame, sex for placement, forced abortions, everything else from the beginning, like from its founding, it's been like that. There's this little weird backlash happening right now, and I enjoy it immensely because all of these dirtbags deserve to go down. The ones who actually did things. There's some other guys who've been caught up in it where they said something at a soccer game out of frustration, and now they've lost their careers. It's stupid, but like Harvey Weinstein and all of his ilk deserve everything they get, and yet none of the industry is changing at all. The Me Too movement is not campaigning for no more nudity clauses. They don't care. They don't actually care. They're all about that kind of sexual liberation / perversion. They just want actually to get further up the chain. They want to get more control themselves, more power themselves. Jennifer Lawrence talked about when she was a teenager, a minor, she had to strip down and wear small pieces of electrical tape and stand in a lineup of naked girls to get a role. And then they told her that she was too fat and sent her home. And that was done by female producers. It's like, it's not a gender issue, really. It's power and exploitation, and it goes all the way back. And I would like to point out that Jennifer Lawrence didn't have to do that. She wasn't in handcuffs. She wanted the role. She wanted to be famous. And so she made the sacrifices to get there. So if you're trying to be famous at all, as you get into it, you're already duped. You're already part of the system. To go to what Steve was saying, you've already bought into that first premise, which is the kiss of death. If you're trying to do something as opposed to be somebody, then you have a chance.
One quick add-on. Although the Hollywood has been this dirty since the 1920s, and it's been always this way. They've added
Since moving pictures were invented.
since the invention. So the thing that they've done now that is different, that is an additional corruption, is pretending to be shocked. Oh, look at my shocked face.
They are actors.
They are actors, and we, the public, are gullible. We think that we believe them when they say nobody knew. And who knew? Everybody knew. All of them knew, and they still do know. And they're just blowing sunshine and trying to get through this tumultuous little Me Too moment. But it's not repentance, and because it's not repentance, it's going to be dirtier and fouler and worse coming out the other side. It's not going to fix anything. And we need to just say no. Just stop subsidizing. We need to go in a different direction.
All right, one more question. All right, you good?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. So I believe it was yesterday that Mr. Sumter was talking about entertainment, and one of the things that he said was that good entertainment stands the test of time. So probably this is more towards you, Mr. Nate. What would you say in that area? What is good in the entertainment, and how do we address entertainment such as Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Great Gatsby, Lord of the Flies, stuff like that? How is that considered good entertainment?
I think that there's a time and a place just to eat some Doritos. It's fine. It's like I don't think that people are going to be watching A Quiet Place in 75 years. They're not going to, or Night at the Museum, but super fun movie in both cases, and a great snack at the gas station. I mean that's really what it's for, but it's not that next level. So the goal for me as a creator, and I mentioned this in my talk, and this kind of goes to the previous question too, the goal for me as a creator is simply to cook a meal that will actually edify and improve people. And I'm not trying to change the world with one story, because I'm not that naive. I just want to tell a story that will actually be positive, will actually be nourishing, and it might be really, really consumable and disposable. And this goes to the same thing. This is same principle that Steve mentioned about being kind to people, and what my dad mentioned earlier about being faithful where you are. It's like, who's within reach? Who's in your class? Who sits next to you? Who sits next to you at church? Who do you see on the street? Yeah, who's your neighbor? And within your orbit, within your reach, you should just be trying to actually give light, trying to actually give something edifying, something nourishing. So if you end up in a place where millions of people are waiting for you to tell them a story or to make a movie, that's fantastic. But you should still be thinking of yourself not as somebody special and fancy. You're not somebody. You're just a servant, and your hope is to give them something nourishing. And if God gives you 10 people within your reach, give them something nourishing. You have a radio audience. You've got a congregation. You've got 6th grade public schoolers around the country reading your books. To span our different vocations, you just try to nourish them, give them light. And so where you are as teenagers, you have people in your lives, real people, not people on Instagram, real people. Quit Instagram. Meet real people and actually give them real things. Try to bring light into their lives, kindness, compassion, and so on.
Let's thank our panel. Thank you.